Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Over half a century driving the people of Tipperary and surrounding areas with quality, reliable and economical vehicles, new and used. Call the sales team today to discuss your next car or van on 067 24 111.
Thanks, Pat. Welcome along to the final hour of Tipp Today. 1800 938 007. Now, we're just speaking to Thomas Conway about global news, and US President Donald Trump has dominated global headlines in recent weeks and months following the United States' controversial move to intervene in Venezuela and arrest President Nicolás Maduro, as well as remarks concerning potential plans for Greenland as well. Now, these developments have prompted many to reconsider plans about emigrating, for example, to the United States amid growing concerns about political uncertainty. But human rights lawyer John Honney, who lived in the US for many years indeed, joins me now live from France. Good morning to you, John.
Good morning, Fran. Nice to speak with you again.
And good to talk to you as well, and good to hear your voice on the radio again, John. You've worked in the States, but you have said, and you were telling Leanne this, that you have zero intention of going anywhere near that banana republic at this point. I presume that's because of Mr. Trump and his policies, is it?
Well, yes. I think that is the straw that broke the camel's back in many ways. But listen, before we begin, Fran, I just want to say something here. I'm aware of two situations of people outside of the US who have made comments about things that are going on that have attracted the interest of the US government. Let's just call it that. One was critical. One, to the surprise of the person, was received a favourable response. So I have no doubt that if we talk today about things that are not liked by the current administration, that could potentially put me on a watch list. But luckily for you and our listeners today, I don't have any problem sharing my opinion. So I just thought I'd flag that up before we get started. But Fran, my time there, I worked with an organisation that was dealing with death row appeals and prisoner class action lawsuits, predominantly in the states of Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana. And it gave me an insight into the country that generally those of us that just go on holiday over there don't really get to see. When we think of America, we think of California, Hawaii, Florida, yes, New York, New England, but we don't know what's really going on down in the flyover states and in the deep south. That's one thing. But I was, happy enough to go there. I went back to the States several times after that. But I think things that have been happening since 2020, when the first times Trump was started talking about the only reason he would lose the election that year would be if there was fraud going on, and then the events that led up to the 6th of January, and now what's been happening since his return. For me, no, it's just no-go. And indeed, in a couple of months' time, I will be turning 60 and was planning a big trip with my wife, which was going to take us through America. But we abandoned that after he got elected last year.
What Donald Trump is doing is quite overt, John. I mean, it's very easy to see what he's doing, and he plays to it, and it seems to be enjoying the power that he has. But is it not fair to say that, that there's been toppling of regimes going on by the United States for the last 60 years or so, but it's been done covertly by the likes of the CIA and that. In other words, when Mr. Trump talks about making America great again, I really don't know what period of time he's talking about.
Well, there's two things to unpack there, Fran. Firstly, I do think there was a sweet spot in American history after the Second World War. No doubt that the country was fairer. And I know they had the Korean War going on and we were going into the Vietnam War, but I think it was a fairer country all round. There was the civil rights movement. Things were happening. You had the Voting Act of 1965, which made an attempt to ensure that First Nations people and people of colour were allowed to vote equally the same as white people. So I think that was the sweet spot. But you go back 100 years in the interwar years, America was not a great place. Starvation, was rampant. Poverty was just, again, rampant. And it was not a fair society. And then after the Second World War, I think it led the way. And I think they could call themselves a democracy for many of us to look up to, albeit that, I'm conscious of the fact that we could have people here of color who would be saying that wasn't necessarily their experience. But things were going forward. As for regime change, you're absolutely right. And let's be honest, we can't just look at an isolation at the US. This has been happening across many, many countries. Russia's doing it now. China's been doing it. Britain has obviously been doing it, and the European powers. But there's something different about the way the Americans are doing it now. Those people who may know a little bit of South American history may well be aware of Operation Condor, which sought to dismantle democratic governments in Chile, Argentina, and Brazil. And we know what they were doing in Cuba. But now there's something much, much more pernicious about what they're doing. And we have to look at it in the light of what Russia and China are doing. It's a return to the days of imperialism.
Yes.
And it's all about one thing now. It's about the oil and other rare earth minerals. My wife's Canadian, so they will tell you talk to Canadians, they're worried about their health and safety because of the fact they've got all the water. But the actions now that are being done by Trump they're twofold. They're firstly demonizing and trying to create enemies, which America has always done. It's always had an enemy. It's been on a war footing since the Second World War. So it's always looking to trigger its economy and go off and get involved in a war. Korea, Vietnam spring to mind. But I would think the biggest worry for Americans and for those living in America is the growing sentiment used by the Trump administration of domestic terrorism. And for that, we're not looking at people like those that were at Waco and things like that. We're talking about people who may be opposing the government of Donald Trump, who may not fall into what he considers to be American. And the efforts now that are being taken to minimize those people. And we look at the woman who was killed last week in Michigan,
Yes.
who straight away was called a domestic terrorist. But what was she doing? She was merely demonstrating and exercising her rights to demonstrate against things that she was unhappy about.
Well, and of course, you know what ICE are saying about this, that, she deliberately attacked the agent with her car. And you look at these, the jury is out on some of the videos, I suppose, that are out there at the moment. So she did, in her way, make an attack on an officer of the state for counter-argument.
With a gun pointed at her,
Yeah.
Fran.
Yeah.
This is the other thing now. And maybe, I would ask your listeners to go and try and listen to the words of a senator by the name of Elisa Slotkin, who gave a speech before Christmas about this growth of the domestic terrorism and identifying homegrown threats, which ultimately, I think we have to look at the fact that there is the midterm elections coming up later in the year. And it may well be that there are going to be a rebound against Trump, and we might well see him become the lame duck president the last 2 years if he loses those. So we're already seeing efforts in play by his administration to abuse those people that would be against him. There is an executive order that's gone out now, which seeks to stigmatize people that he perceives, not what the government or the people perceive, but what he perceives as people being anti-American, anti-capitalist, anti-Christian, anti-family, and showing hostility towards them. In the year that he's been in power, he started criminal investigations against 17, 18 people. I think this morning we read that Jerome Powell now is in his sight screen. US law firms that were involved in the litigation against him during the 4 years were all targeted as well. So it's a playbook whereby he's trying to firstly kind of come down hard on his opponents, but send a message to anyone else. If you go against me, then you will have the full wrath of the federal government going against you. What that is, Fran, that is not a democracy. That is a dictatorship that is in play. And we saw that for all to see. And I don't think you're quite right. We can debate the situation in Michigan last week. But we saw how close that country was to toppling on the 6th of January 2021. And but for Mike Pence, and I wouldn't say he's my favourite politician, but for him standing up for what was right, that country would have toppled on that day.
What about the Democrats, John? I mean, where's Obama? Where's Clinton? They're remarkably silent, are they not?
They're sleeping at the wheel, the Democrats, and they have been sleeping at the wheel for 4 or 5 years now. Now, I can't quote this, and you know, it's just something I have picked up on along the way. When Obama's term was finishing the second time, it was Biden that was due to run. He was going to run, but they went for Hillary Clinton, which was a mistake.
Yeah.
Biden would have walked that election. Trump would have lost, and then he would have gone back to hosting his TV show, and then we would have carried on. But when Biden came back and beat him in the second election, he was way too old. And the Democrats had 4 years before the last election to get their house in order and get the person lined up that was going to run against Trump, because he was going to run again. That there was no doubt about, because he couldn't let that stain on his reputation of having lost. So they had 4 years to do this, and they left it till 100 days before, and they put someone in. And with the greatest respect to America, I don't think they're ready for a woman president yet, albeit that they are probably many, many great women that could be president and do a far better job than any of the men. But they left it too late. Secondly, the Democrats fought the election on issues that were not important to American people. I don't doubt transgender rights are important to 200,000 people of the transgender community, but that's not what you're going to win an election on in America. And they fell asleep at the wheel, and Trump was able to go there and start saying, oh, gas is expensive, we're being overtaken by foreigners. And that's what played. And they fought the election, because the American elections are not won across states. They are won in small counties. And it may well be that in one swing state, 3 or 4 counties swing it within the state. And they fought in those counties, and the Democrats were asleep. The Democrats have got one job in 2026, and that is to win the midterms and then wrestle back the power. I'm not sure that those elections will go ahead, because I suspect that the way that he's teeing up his ICE agents across the country is that he will invoke the Insurrection Act if he thinks he's going to lose, play it out on the TV, trigger some sort of incident that he would then justify to bring his troops onto the streets and say that we can't have the elections because it's just not safe. That's also given the fact that I said about the executive order that he's put out before Christmas, which again potentially would allow him to say, oh, I think certain groups are terrorists, and it could be the Democrats. He could even go as far as making it difficult for them to raise money, to run a viable opposition within the states that are having these elections. And so it is an extremely difficult time. And so for the Democrats, they've got to box clever. They've got to box clever. I wouldn't run with a Clinton. I wouldn't put a Clinton out there, but Obama still has currency, and Obama needs to be kind of there and speaking up and speaking out.
There's so much else going on that it's almost mind-boggling. And I'm thinking of Greenland here. I'm thinking of Europe's play there. I'm thinking of NATO potentially protecting itself against a member of NATO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, there's ludicrous stuff going on, is there not?
Well, look, Greenland is about resources. Canada will be about resources, but Greenland, well, we'll say belongs to Denmark. We'll use that phraseology, but it's part of NATO. It's already in the club. You don't need to take it over. The thing with Venezuela, he's gone after him because he says he's a drug dealer. Okay, all right. But where do we stop? There are plenty of leaders on the world stage that are criminal. We're not going after them. What Venezuela is a play for their oil, but it's also trying to wrestle back some sort of power from the BRICS nations, okay? And also the fear that if the BRIC nations suddenly start saying we're not going to start using the dollar anymore, we're going to use a different currency than the petrodollar, then that really would impact the the US economy. But now, as I said earlier, we're in a period of imperialism, and I'm sure anyone would just turn around and say, and I'm not the only one saying this, it's like 1984. The Americans are going for that stretch of land down through, all the way from Greenland down to South America. China has got the rest of Asia in its back pocket, and I'm sure people in Taiwan are equally worried now as to their safety, should China just sail across the South China Sea and take that. We've seen that then playing out in the South China Sea, as far as the Philippines, a country I've lived in, sailing their ships very close, taking over small pieces of land and putting airstrips on it. And now you've got Russia seeking to come up to the door of Europe and down through and into the Middle East. So that leaves Africa to play. So what will Europe do? Will Europe suddenly decide, well, we need to have some sort of skin in the game, some sort of access to utilities and resources, and start becoming the colonial powers down in Africa as well? It's a horrendous time for the world to be living in, and really we don't need it.
It's
Frank.
just fascinating. Is there any grouping within the Republicans who are saying, whoa, this is just going too far? Is there any grouping within the Republican Party?
To be honest, Fran, I'm not aware. I think there are enough that are uneasy about it, but they're too scared to come up and speak out because of the reaction of the MAGA movement against them. I can't remember the lady's name, but I'm sure your listeners will. There was I think she was in Georgia, and she spoke up and spoke out, and boom, bang, straight back in on her that she's anti-American, she's this, she's that, and the other. So that's the way it is now. If anyone does speak up and speak out, even from within the Republican Party, then they're going to be jumped on. You look at how Ted Cruz, even J.D. Vance, has had stuff in the past where he was criticizing Trump, and boom, he's back in the tent now because they're all sucking up to him. They're all too scared to speak up and speak out. So it's a very, very dangerous time in there. And I think for us, not living in the US or wanting to go to the US, the fear is that of contagion. Look what's happening in Argentina. Look what Bolsonaro was trying to do. Trump saying that if the Argentinians didn't vote Malia, then that would cause him difficulties in funding them and their programs over there. And we're seeing this happen more and more, that leaders are now kind of taking their cue from the Trump playbook on how to become a dictator. And I did say to Leanna, call it a banana republic, because that's the type of thing that he's doing, that is done in banana republics, where you end up with someone being in power for 30, 40 years, handing it down to one of their own choices, partly because they've created so much power for themselves that they're fearful that if they lose the power themselves to an opponent, that power can then be used against them when they're no longer in office. And that's the world we're living in, Fran.
It's very frightening indeed. Can I finally ask you, John, and briefly, if you would, climate change and what's happening there, and almost a reversal in a lot of ways in terms of how it's viewed. What would you have to say on that, John?
I think there's two camps. There are those of us who believe it because we've seen it and we notice it and we feel it, and then those who are deniers. Those who like me, who believe that climate change is a very real thing, have got something on our side called science. Those that don't have it seem to kind of rely upon fuzzy science at best. I think Trump himself has said, "Oh yeah, but the world kind of heats up and warms down, and so on and so forth." But the fact is, this time round, it is man-made. COVID taught us, if nothing, it taught us one thing about how a world that wasn't polluting and using fossil fuels changed. For the first time, people in Delhi could see the Himalaya. The air that we breathed was that little bit better. I was living in Qatar at the time, and Qatar is a highly polluted country. But even the air there felt different. So we are living at a very difficult time. We also have to look at climate change from the way that we use the resources of the earth. And one of those that is critical is how we produce our food. the Earth's topsoil is no longer now as effective as it was X number of years ago. And indeed, there are those people that work in that area who will tell you that the topsoil's ability to produce nutritious food is in decline and may not be producing enough food over the course of the next 50, 60 years. We then can link in the way that we live, and we're flying around and so on and so forth, to how we have the possibility of greater dangers from pandemics, and so on and so forth. We always have a pandemic. Every 100 years we have a pandemic. We had the Spanish flu, we go back to the Black Plague. But we also run so many risks with disease because of the way we move around, the way we treat the animals of the earth as well, and the consumption of animals, which also kind of causes us problems. It's a time for serious thinking and action. My biggest fear when it comes to these things, Fran, is that it's a little too late in the day, and the actions that now need to be taken on climate change require serious thinking, and that isn't there, much less the will to take the action to do something about it.
Most interesting conversation. John, we appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for coming on with us.
My pleasure, Fran, and a happy new year to you and all our listeners.
Many happy returns to you and your family as well. Thank you. That's John Honney there. John's a human rights lawyer, living in France at the moment, spent many years indeed working with people on death row in the United States, and also has Tipperary connections as well. 1800 938 007.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage Puckon. Now is the time to pick up your next van. From the award-winning Peugeot Partner van to the Expert and the load-lugging Boxer van. We have big vans, high-roof vans, long wheelbase vans. You'll find them all at Slattery's Garage Puckon. See slatterysgarage.ie.